It's July 23rd, 2022. I'm watching the CBS this morning. It's Saturday mornings. It's the episode which is E30. Um, and on this particular episode, they mention things that I did not learn in the local schools. They've totally failed to mention or teach the history of the civilization that I feel like I've lost touch with. I don't know how I lost touch with my own kind. I don't know why there's so much not us filling into the local area. I don't know why I've been almost, I feel like, buried in something and totally forgotten about, but yet serve a completely different purpose. Um, they mentioned something today on this E30 at 52.40 called Telestar, which is television intercontinental hookup. It's the with the European Broadcasting Union. It's a transatlantic TV America, and it's July 23rd, 1962. They mentioned something about Mormon tabernacle, which is the way that the Americans pronunciate it. But if I look, it's Tabor and a knack for things of the great beyond, the world beyond this, whatever. Um, then it says it had something to do with Bell Laboratories. I'm still located on Bell in New York, just off of Bell within the 4-3 for the 7. It says Bell Lab for, that's where I was actually delivered for the 7. Bell Laboratory and AT&T were involved in something called a NASA for the America. They only mention America, but technically the broadcast shows it's the United States of America. So it's North America, to be real clear on what statesmen are what. Because it is strange when I look into this passport social studies program with New York City that was just published and just taught to the 4th graders, my son being one of them in attendance. There's no mention whatsoever of the importance of my civilization that I've lost touch with. I mean, I'm still in touch with Linda and Lou. I'm barely in touch with my 3 older children. Whole nother story on local problems I have with the situation that's been ongoing, and nobody's even reached out a hand to try to help me. They've in fact actually made it worse. And then it goes to 30.41 in Oakland, California. There's a port system for transport of goods and services, like import export type of a thing, that claims it has union status, and there's like a whole big thing going on there. And I'm looking at the people, and Lewis is like, now how could they not pay the people at the docks? And I was like, well, Lewis, if it's an illegal union and an illegal ring and an illegal cargo shipment, they really shouldn't be paying the illegals to conduct business this way. At some point, there has to be a crackdown, and then a follow-up superhero league to chase down the vermin and eradicate them. I'm just saying, to help the system regain its fluidity and solidarity for whoever's in charge of that process. So he's like, no, they couldn't have a union, Nicole, if the federal government didn't approve it. And I go, see, here's the problem, Lou. I get theoretically what you're saying in a perfect world kind of situation. But like the thieves and the scum and the scoundrel, they don't live in like the law. They don't. They have a tendency to like to bend the law, to work around the law. I was like, so this, like, they're going to have to come to the federal government for union approval when they're having illegal cargoes and then paying off certain representatives. Like, it just I've seen the movies, Lou. I get where the holes in the system are. I just don't get why justice is not cleaning it up fast enough for like my generation to be safe, and now for whatever's arrived, because everything's been so awful. um so that happened, and that's on the TV, which I'll show. And then it goes to the time patch of 42.53, which is the fusion lab story with plasma, and like solar flares of the sun that look much more stable, but yet they're unable to keep and sustain it for more. At least that's what they say on the television. Um, and then that goes back to like they're using fission, which they define as breaking the particles apart and destabilizing it into multiple parts. And that's what they use in the really toxic process that they call nuclear, um, at like reactors and things. Um, but then there's this fusion part that they mention, which looks a little more stable. But again, and that's, they're saying, I mean, like key op words for me was salt water and some lithium batteries. Um, and then that would power enough for a lifetime for like one person without like environmental catastrophes in like they're using in the fission part, um, which I don't understand how that happens in allowances, but here we are. So I'm gonna highlight what they highlighted this morning, just to let whomever know that in this social studies guide, they wasted a lot of papers on non-important stuff. Some sections are important in here, but they don't mention anything about the more recent telecommunications, the bells, the who was involved, the transatlantic. They don't mention Mormon Tabernacle. They don't mention Bell Labs. They don't mention AT&T. They don't mention NASA in this level book of history or social studies. They do, however, mention good old favorites, of like a couple of the past wealthy persons. They do mention, not all of them, but a few of the big names. They do mention Thomas Jefferson. They do mention Alexander Hamilton. And that's what's made it through. They do mention the big five countries or the big five populations that were allowable, one being a broad stroke, for certain, whatever that might have been cross cultural, but within like one agreement. Um, so there is this lag in information, and then there's this big push of this thievery ring that's here, that's growing larger and more dangerous, being what's in Oakland, California at the moment, with this trucker transport thing. I did have somebody within my life frame, through Chase, the bank that I worked at, in a respectable uniform daily, and I showed up and I was in the lobby and I was on surveillance camera daily, in what I call my La Femme Nikita outfit. But it was the Chase uniform with a pencil skirt just below the knee. Um, I did in my Italian boots. There was in there, I was invited through the RM, whatever that stands for, residential manager of the business bank. He had a client who was an importer exporter. Did not know the man, had never seen the man before. Bob, the guy that worked at Chase that I knew from coming into my branch, he made the invitation, which because Chase has some relationship with Madison Square Garden, and it was a hockey game, which I had never been to, Rangers. So they took me there. Within the corporate guidelines, I had asked, am I allowed to go since I'm a personal banker or a small business specialist? Is that something that's allowed? Um, and so he said yes. He checked with the manager, which was her name was Donnelly, believe it or not, even though I was in Suffolk County. Um, and so I don't know who this importer exporter was. Again, it was a mention of the name real quick in the beginning, and then for the rest of the night, like I didn't say. There were not names exchanged. I mean, it was like a one-time thing, and I didn't really, as usual, something so historic seems so ordinary in the moment, and you don't even think about it or anything past that moment. Um, so that was interesting. But that was the only importer exporter I had ever met. And again, did not look like Bob and I, was something totally foreign. But again, I don't know from where.
Good afternoon, and soon we'll be saying good evening to Europe on the first exchange of live programs between the television networks of the United States and their affiliated stations and the European Broadcasting Union.
Now, the map is very clear what the map is for this one particular whatever. And then who it goes to, and they have a list of who this initial connection was with using something called a Telestar.
That was CBS News legend Walter Cronkite co-hosting a landmark event that would make telecommunications history.
Ich werde diese Sendung für Deutschland berichten.
60 years ago today, and for the first time ever, 3 U.S. broadcast networks and the CBC in Canada beamed a live program from the United States to Europe by way of Telstar 1, the first television broadcast satellite. That 20-minute program was called simply enough America, July 23rd, 1962. It was watched by millions of viewers here in the U.S. and in Europe. The broadcast featured live images from across the nation, including the Mormon Tabernacle Choir performing at Mount Rushmore, a Cubs-Phillies game at Wrigley Field.
This baseball game is being seen in Europe right now over the Telstar satellite.
And from the White House, then...
So it's really clear in 1962 what North America looked like in this stroke of genius of somebody recording it and sending a copy to Europe. Just saying. Because it, for some reason, baseball games, daily life, no longer seems the way it was in just 1962, and we're in 2022 at the moment, and I've been here since 1978.
President John F. Kennedy's weekly press conference.
I understand that part of today's press conference is being relayed by the Telestar communications satellite to viewers across the Atlantic, and this is another indication of the extraordinary world in which we live.
Robert Howard Thompson is a professor of television and popular culture at Syracuse University. Take us back to July 23rd, 1962. Just how groundbreaking was the Telstar 1 satellite at that time?
It was groundbreaking. The ability to send those signals up there and get them back down on another continent was really very important and cutting edge.
The 170-pound Telstar satellite was developed by Bell Laboratories for AT&T at a cost of almost $60 million. That's about $600 million in today's money. It was launched by NASA, but was actually America's first privately sponsored commercial spaceflight mission, decades before companies like SpaceX got into the game. And its spherical form became a pop culture icon and maybe an inspiration.
That's no moon. It's a space station. It's too big to be a space station.
For the first time, I was a senior in high school, and the first time I watched Star Wars and saw the Death Star, I thought, wow, that looks a lot like Telstar. And Death Star, Telstar, they could be siblings.
Of course, it's a rule in live TV that things don't always go as planned. And the first transatlantic broadcast was no exception.
The French are ready, and the program can now start.
Eurovision, we're now putting up our Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor on the left side of our monitor. If you'll please put up your Eiffel Tower in Paris next to it.
And there were a few other glitches, but the broadcast was seen as a great success. And 2 hours later, the Europeans transmitted their own images back to us.
I am standing 500 miles from Sicily in Vienna.
Here we are 60 years later. What is Telstar's legacy?
It gave us a half a century and more of being able to see live stuff from all over the world as it happened. But strangely enough,
I like theoretically that's what this guy thinks of in his profession, but I'll tell you for real life and having tracked it on the original antenna broadcast stations of the units 2, 4, 5, and 7, which I think there was only originally these, but whatever. They do not show world news. Even on the world news, it's very brief and it's cut very short. And it does not explain or keep people current with the events that are happening elsewhere that may impact the internal continent. Whatever.
enough, what Telstar did, satellite communications, that was so revolutionary, we're still using it. There's all kinds of satellites orbiting all over the place now that we use all the time.
And a really fascinating footnote, because I'm such a sci-fi lover, is that the idea of beaming waves in space came from Arthur C. Clarke, who is the author of
2001,
2010.
Oh, 2001. You mean the year that the World Trade Center towers were attacked and this huge terrorism thing started in New York? Just want to make sure.
So many other great books, but just what your guys said, innovation, imagination, so important, and ideas.
Yeah.
So important to getting us to that next step.
Now we just have to be able to beam ourselves.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Star Trek, beam there it is. Gene Roddenberry already thought about it.
I like it. All right. That was a step back in time, but one man has made his life's mission to bring.
Okay, so now this is the spin from a messenger that whatever, and then it shows about this. They claim to be a union of truckers at the port, but it just doesn't seem right, which is what I was saying to Lewis this morning. If they're not being paid, is it illegal cargo that they're forcing into the supply chain that causes a whole other network of products haven't been tested, haven't been deemed healthy for consumers. I mean, like, if it's food, and especially since they say it's food, well, where's it coming from? I mean, then it brings in all sorts of like parasites and microbiotic problems, E. coli, but strains of E. coli from sections of the world that are not the same as North America. I mean, again, there's all sorts of things that go into imports. Then I worry most about this new cholesterol strategy with biological attacks, with the oils, because there's some things on gas, and I'm like, is that gas lighting? And then there's this thing about oils, but all sorts of oils. I'm like, vegetable doesn't have oil. Which vegetable? Like a carrot doesn't really have oil. Not like the kind that comes in the bottle that they try to sell on the shelves. I mean, like, what's in that oil? But yet people buy it and use it for all sorts of things.
CBS Saturday Morning. We begin this half hour with a labor problem in California that could affect the nation's economy. Independent truckers have all but shut down the port of Oakland. They're protesting a new state law that resets how they work, including whether they're entitled to job benefits. Oakland is a major hub in world commerce, and as Jamie Yukas reports, the concern is that the work stoppage will threaten the already strained supply chain.
This is one of the 10 busiest ports in the nation. Now, it's silent. Except on the outside, where truckers gathered for a 5th straight day. They've effectively shut down the port of Oakland, protesting a new California labor.
I'm confused.
Labor law that makes it harder for independent drivers to operate.
I'm here to support my family because
I'm confused.
we have bills to pay.
Gladys Hernandez says she's been here every day and has no plans to leave.
You don't want to turn labor, union, and corporate truck drivers against you. You want them with you, right?
Oakland Police Captain Clay Birch says he understands the driver's frustration, but warns of unintended consequences. The shutdown is the latest in a long line of West Coast work stoppages that have affected the supply chain and added to inflation. Cargo here is mostly agricultural.
It's about the greater good. It's about the consumer as well. Think about the end game here.
What's not getting out? What's not getting in?
We're talking about perishable goods, food items, things like that.
Right now, this is limited to Oakland, but there is concern the protests could spread to Southern California, where they are still recovering after massive gridlock last year.
What if people stop being sympathetic to you because they start seeing the grocery prices go up?
It's okay, no problem, but I have two families to support.
As these containers start to pile up, the ripple effect is significant. It's not just the protesting drivers, it's anyone at the dock who is loading or offloading. They're not getting paid. For CBS Saturday Morning, Jamie.
Why would somebody stop paying them if they were doing legal work? I'm just curious. I mean, like, because it's one thing, like, agriculturally, it's whatever, it's being forced upon the shore, and then it's being disseminated into the public. Public doesn't know that there's a problem at the port. And then who's actually doing the agricultural checks for disease control, for health reasons, for end product consumers, ingestibles, that they're not going to start some catastrophic chain of biological events based on the fact of how this process is already seeming really suspect, and it's not following the normal process. There's been a whole lot of changes and not for the better.
Mucus, Oakland.
It was a watershed moment in broadcast history, and it happened 60 years ago to the day. Still to come, how America and Europe came face to face live on television screens for the first time.
Now, for some reason, they're attributing this next segment with this like fog or smog level with Chicago.
This morning, the new push for fusion energy, a cleaner, safer form of nuclear energy, has long been a goal. There have been unrealistic hopes and promises for decades. But slowly, progress is being made. To get an up-close look, we traveled to Princeton, New Jersey, to see what life is like at 200 million degrees. What tunnel are we in?
So we're in the tunnel that leads from the control room to the machine itself.
Inside an experimental laboratory at Princeton University, underneath a nondescript building, Stephen Cowley took us down the long corridor that leads to his life's work.
All these are subsystems of the machine.
An attempt to recreate the energy in the middle of the sun.
It's really the perfect energy source.
Fusion, when atomic nuclei come together, takes place in the heart of stars. It's the opposite of fission, when nuclei break apart. Fission is how nuclear power plants work. Also nuclear bombs.
1 million tons of water alive with deadly rays.
Fusion has been science's holy energy grail for the last century. The fits and starts have led to plenty of frustration.
The perfect energy source is one that doesn't take up much space, has a virtually inexhaustible supply, is safe. It's fusion.
You gave a TED Talk in 2009. You said fusion by 2030. We're 8 years away.
This is the problem of the modern age with video, isn't it? Caught me right there.
You keep submitting to interviews here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are looking now. So the National Academy of Sciences has come forward to say we want to start actually producing electricity by 2035. I was close.
Okay, but that's still not a guarantee. It's a hope.
Yeah.
Hope is closer to reality when you take a look at a tokamak. There it is.
That's it. That's the machine right there. And if you look, you can see the red things are coils.
Inside a tokamak, temperatures can reach up to 200 million degrees when there's no such thing as solids, liquids, or gas. It's all plasma.
When you look at the eruptions from the sun, you know, there's pictures you see of solar flares erupting from the sun.
Yeah.
That's actually plasma forcing its way through a magnetic field and out. And we're trying to do that here. We're not trying to let it erupt. We're trying to control it, to hold it down.
What's happening on the sun happens
absolutely
right here.
Right inside there.
Right now, experimental machines like these are only able to sustain fusion at target temperatures for a few seconds. And the goal is to have that sustained.
Yeah.
For hours.
Hours, days, months, years.
Once they can do that, they'll be able to use that heat to make steam, which eventually makes electricity. Simple.
Simple, yeah. Yes.
Is this a dangerous business?
One of the great advantages of fusion is that there are no bad case safety issues with it. So it can't melt down. It doesn't have an explosive potential or anything else like that. So it's a very safe energy source that you could put next to your town. That's a big advantage.
Cowley believes our long-term energy future is a combination of renewables like wind and solar and fusion. The obvious advantage of fusion is that you don't need sun or wind to get the job done. A few gallons of seawater and the lithium in a couple of laptop batteries could provide enough energy for one person for their entire life. Is it a money issue right now?
There's always a money issue, but actually what we really need to do is to drive the innovation. It's ideas. Bright scientists coming into the field and solving the remaining problems. I think we can do fusion. Our big challenge at the moment is to do it at a cost that the consumer wants to pay for their electricity.
It's not free. It costs money to do all this research, and then it costs money to buy the energy. But think about that for a second. The energy in a few gallons of seawater and a couple laptop batteries could power your life, your entire life.
Unbelievable. A+ on explaining it to us, dumbing it down.
And it making sense.
Absolutely.
And the idea that they can do it, you just need to do it for this extended period of time so that you can have enough steam to create the energy.
But the best part of this is the potential for it, maybe not to be free, but low cost.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, people aren't going to do it, and if it's super expensive, maybe in our lifetimes, but certainly we hope in our kids' lifetime.
We have hope. It reminds me of The Saint, that movie. Cold fusion, anyway.
I haven't seen that in a while.
Never mind.
Is that Val Kilmer?
No, we're gonna, thank you, Jeff. But we'll take it for granted today, but seeing live TV images from across the globe is once a...
It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way universe, galaxy is broken. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.